My child, I need your full attention right now. Before you do anything else, sit down and allow yourself to become still. Because what is about to settle over your life is greater than anything you have been preparing yourself to imagine. If you try to meet it by standing in your own strength, it will feel too heavy to carry. What has been prepared for you stretches beyond every limit. Your mind has learned to measure. And, chosen one, it has been waiting for this very moment to reach you. Perhaps you noticed your breathing change before you understood why. Maybe your hands grew a little unsteady, or something deep inside your chest quietly whispered, "Pay attention." That response did not come from your thoughts. It rose from a place within you that has been listening long before your mind knew how to explain what your spirit has recognized for years. You were never meant to arrive here by accident. There are moments in life that seem ordinary until you realize they were quietly leading you towards something you were always meant to hear. This message is one of those moments. It is not here to give you a few minutes of comfort before life returns to normal. It comes to awaken something that has been waiting beneath the surface of your heart for far longer than you realize. That is why I asked you to sit. This is more than a posture. It is an invitation to stop carrying everything for just a moment and let your body become quiet enough to receive. If something inside you is already saying, "This is for me," or if you felt an unexpected warmth rise in your chest, or your eyes begin to fill for reasons you cannot explain, type "I receive this" now in the comments. Sometimes a simple act of agreement becomes the first step in opening your heart to what has already begun moving toward you. There are things about you that you have never found words for, not because you wanted to hide them, but because every time you tried, they sounded too strange or too personal for anyone else to understand. Some experiences live so deeply inside us that language always feels too small. Yet today, I want to speak to those places you have quietly carried alone. You have lived with a weight that few people ever notice. It was never simply sadness. It felt more like walking through each day with invisible stones resting on your shoulders while everyone else seemed untouched. You entered rooms and somehow sensed tension before anyone spoke. And more times than you can count, you carried emotions that never belonged to you, wondering why you always left feeling heavier than when you arrived. Maybe there was a dinner where everyone laughed while you sat quietly, feeling something no one else seemed to notice. Maybe there was a drive home where the silence inside the car felt louder than any conversation. Perhaps you looked at your phone more than once, wanting to tell someone how exhausted your heart had become, only to lock the screen again because you believed no one would truly understand. Chosen one, hear this clearly. What you have been carrying is real, and the season of carrying what was never yours is beginning to come to an end. There is something else about you that reaches even deeper. You have experienced moments when an unexplainable knowing interrupted an ordinary day, moments when your body became still because something inside you quietly said, "Not this way." Maybe you turned down a road without knowing why, or maybe you almost agreed to something until an unshakable feeling settled in your chest and the words refused to come out. Those moments were never meaningless to you. Even when you questioned yourself afterward, a part of you always sensed there was guidance moving beneath the surface of your life, speaking without sound and leading without force. Most people spend years trying to explain those quiet moments away, yet something within you continued listening because, deep inside, you always knew you were hearing more than coincidence. Now let me name the pattern that so many people carry in silence. There were seasons when everything seemed to fall apart at once. Relationships shifted, opportunities disappeared, familiar places no longer felt like home, and it seemed as though every foundation beneath your feet gave way together. You asked the same question again and again. Why does everything collapse at the same time? One day, you will look back at those seasons with different eyes. What felt like destruction was clearing ground that had become too crowded for what was always meant to grow there. When the Creator prepares something beyond human measurement, He does not renovate around broken foundations. He clears what can no longer hold what is coming, so something stronger can finally take its place. If these words feel uncomfortably familiar, if they sound more like memories than ideas, type "I am the one." in the comments. What comes next only makes sense after you recognize that the collapse was never the conclusion of your story. It became the place where a deeper beginning quietly took root. Long before you knew how to describe it, there was already a fire living inside you. It was never just ambition or another passing dream. Even after disappointment, even after seasons when you questioned everything, something continued calling you forward, refusing to disappear. Chosen one. What lives within you has always been more than a goal. It is part of who you have always been. And then there are the battles you rarely speak about. There were betrayals that changed the way your heart learned to trust. There were mornings when simply opening your eyes felt heavier than anyone around you could understand. Maybe you sat alone after a painful conversation, staring through the windshield without turning the key, or lay awake in a quiet room listening to the clock while wondering how much more your heart could carry. Yet somehow you're still here. You are still breathing, still searching, still reaching toward hope, even after teaching yourself to expect less so. Disappointment would hurt a little less. There is something sacred in that quiet endurance. Something that has remained alive inside you through every season that tried to convince you to let go. Stay with me now, because every piece of your story connects here. Over time, your heart slowly learned to place limits around what it believed it could safely receive. It was never pride, and it was never a lack of faith. It was a way of surviving, after too many prayers seemed to disappear into silence, and too many hopes arrived, carrying the weight of disappointment. Without realizing it, you built an invisible ceiling over your own expectations. Every unanswered prayer became another layer. Every delayed promise quietly whispered, "Do not hope too much next time." You called it wisdom because it felt safer than dreaming freely again. Yet beneath that careful thinking was simply a heart trying to protect itself from breaking one more time. That is the blessing ceiling. It is not something the Creator placed above you. It is something pain slowly taught you to build, one difficult season after another. You have lived beneath it, dreamed beneath it, and prayed beneath it, never realizing how much smaller your expectations had become than the love that has been reaching toward you all along. Your heart learned to treat hope as something dangerous because hope had become connected with loss. So whenever something larger tried to enter your life, a quiet part of you stepped back before it could fully arrive. You believed you were protecting yourself. In truth, you were protecting old wounds that had mistaken caution for peace. Here is the shift that changes everything. The Creator has never measured his faithfulness by the limits your pain created. What has been prepared for you was never designed to fit beneath the ceiling you built during your hardest seasons. Chosen one, even now, something greater is pressing gently against those old boundaries, inviting you to discover that what has always been waiting for you was never smaller than your fear. It was always greater than it. And even now, something is pressing gently against the limits you have lived beneath for so long. The blessing that carries your name has never stopped moving toward you, and the walls built by years of disappointment are beginning to give way under its weight. Chosen one, perhaps that explains why your heart has felt restless lately, why ordinary days suddenly carry emotions you cannot explain, or why you wake with the quiet feeling that something is changing, even though nothing around you looks different yet. Those moments are not empty emotions passing through you. They are the first signs that the life you learned to survive inside is becoming too small for what is trying to enter. You thought you were protecting yourself from another heartbreak, but somewhere along the way you also protected yourself from receiving something greater than you had ever allowed yourself to imagine. The season of waiting shaped your endurance, and now that same season is asking you to open your hands instead of closing them. I want to walk with you through a simple practice, not because you need to earn what is coming, but because your heart deserves the freedom to recognize it when it arrives. The first step begins in quietness. Sit somewhere without distraction and ask yourself one honest question. What is the greatest blessing I truly believe God could bring into my life? Do not answer the way you think you should. Answer with the truth you rarely admit. The answer that rises when no one else is listening. Write that answer down and look at it for a moment. You may discover that what you wrote reveals less about God's generosity than it does about the boundaries your past has quietly taught you to accept. Sometimes what we mistake for faith is simply the edge of our wounded expectations. Now gently stretch that vision beyond what feels comfortable. Imagine a blessing far greater than the one you first allowed yourself to believe. Not to force hope, but to loosen the grip of every disappointment that convinced you to expect less. You may feel resistance in your chest. You may notice your thoughts rushing to explain why it could never happen. And if that happens, simply let those feelings exist without running from them. Resistance often appears whenever an old fear realizes it may no longer be in control. It does not always mean you are moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes it means you have finally stepped beyond the walls that pain built around your imagination. Chosen one, your heart has spent years learning how to survive. Now it is slowly learning how to receive. The final step may feel the most unfamiliar. Release the endless need to prepare yourself until you believe you are finally worthy. How many times have you thought, when I become stronger, when I heal a little more, not when everything is finally in order, then I will be ready? Yet love has never waited for perfect conditions before entering a life willing to welcome it. The Father's presence has always been able to bring peace into places that still looked unfinished. He does not stand outside the door, waiting for every room of your heart to become spotless. He enters, and His presence begins the restoration from the inside out. Chosen one, there comes a moment when preparation gives way to trust. And that moment is where receiving begins. If you have stayed with me this far, and something inside you knows these words are reaching places you have never spoken aloud, type, "I am ready," in the comments. Let those words become your quiet agreement with what is unfolding. Sometimes willingness is the only door that needs to open before everything else begins to move. But there is another layer beneath everything we have talked about, and it is even harder to recognize because it hides behind moments that should have brought joy. Have you ever prayed for something with all your heart, only to feel strangely unsettled when it finally arrived? Instead of peace, your body became tense. Instead of relief, your hands felt cold. Your breathing changed, and a quiet voice whispered that it would never last. Perhaps you have watched yourself slowly pull away from the very answer you had spent years asking for. You questioned the relationship that finally felt safe. You hesitated when the opportunity opened. You found reasons to expect it all to disappear because losing had become more familiar than receiving. This does not mean there is something wrong with you. It simply reveals how deeply your heart adapted to seasons of scarcity, grief, and unanswered longing. When pain becomes familiar, abundance can feel unfamiliar, and what is unfamiliar often feels unsafe before it ever feels like home. Think about Hannah, who poured out her heart before God until those around her misunderstood what they were seeing. She carried such deep longing, but her prayers looked uncomfortable to everyone watching. Yet she kept bringing her heart honestly before the one who understood every tear. When the answer finally came, it reached far beyond the single request she had carried for so long. That is the quiet pattern woven throughout so many lives of faith. What begins as one prayer often opens the door to something far greater than the person praying could have imagined. Chosen one, perhaps what you have been asking for is only the beginning of a story whose fullness you cannot yet see. Maybe you asked for relief because your heart was tired of carrying so much. Perhaps what is brewing beneath the surface is restoration that reaches deeper than relief ever could. Maybe you longed for stability because you simply wanted life to stop shaking, while something even greater has been shaping a deeper peace that comes from knowing you are finally walking where you were always meant to be. Before we continue, hold one question gently in your heart. What if the heaviness that has clouded your thinking for so long is not the truest version of you? What if beneath the weariness, beneath the waiting, beneath everything life has layered over your spirit, the clearest and most fully alive version of who you have always been is still there, quietly waiting to emerge? Now let me bring you to another part of this journey, chosen one, because there is a reason you were told to sit before anything else. Think about what your body does when you remain standing. Your shoulders tighten without you realizing it. Your hands stay ready. Even your breathing carries the quiet expectation that everything depends on what you do next. Standing has become the posture of surviving, of striving, of believing you must somehow earn what is already moving toward you. But the invitation was never to stand taller, it was to sit. Sitting is the quiet posture of someone who no longer feels the need to chase every answer or carry every burden alone. There comes a moment when your body finally exhales. Your shoulders soften and something inside you whispers, "It is safe to stop holding everything together." Perhaps you have forgotten what that feels like. Maybe you have spent so many years anticipating disappointment that even moments of peace make you uneasy. Your heart became so familiar with bracing for impact that rest itself started feeling unfamiliar, almost undeserved. Yet chosen one, receiving begins where striving finally loosens its grip. Imagine closing every window that has been demanding your attention. Imagine laying down every unfinished conversation, every fear about tomorrow, every attempt to control what only God can carry. That quiet stillness is more than silence. It is creating space for your soul to recognize what has been waiting patiently outside the noise. For so long you have tried to receive while your hands were already full. You kept running from one responsibility to another, believing that if you worked hard enough, healed enough, prayed enough, or became strong enough, then perhaps you would finally be ready. Yet all the while, God waited with remarkable patience, never rushing you, never withdrawing His promise, simply waiting until your heart became quiet enough to receive it. The first step is releasing the illusion that everything depends on your effort. Some things in life can only be welcomed, never controlled. You cannot force the sunrise to come earlier, and you cannot rush what has been unfolding under God's care long before you knew it was happening. Your responsibility has never been to control the timing. It has always been to keep your heart open when the moment arrives. The second step is allowing yourself to feel safe again. For someone who has lived through repeated disappointment, safety can feel unfamiliar. You become so accustomed to expecting loss that joy feels temporary before it even begins. The chosen one, your heart deserves to discover what it feels like to rest without waiting for everything to fall apart. The third step is gently releasing the habit of asking for what has already begun moving toward you. There are seasons when we continue praying from a place of fear, while heaven has already begun preparing the answer. The waiting is not always about whether God is willing to give. Sometimes it is about allowing your heart enough time to believe it can finally receive. There is one more truth you need to see, because it changes the way you understand every prayer you have ever whispered. So often you asked according to the size of your experiences. You prayed within the boundaries of what seemed possible, because life had quietly taught you to expect only what could be measured. Your prayers were sincere, but your pain had taught your imagination to stay small. There is always a distance between what you can imagine and what God is able to prepare. That distance is not created because your faith is weak. It exists because your vision has been shaped by earthly limits, while His heart has never been confined by them. Chosen one, what has your name on it may be far greater than anything your present understanding has allowed you to hope for. Perhaps you asked only for enough strength to make it through another week, while something deeper has been growing within you all along. Perhaps you longed for someone simply to stay, while God has been shaping relationships built on faithfulness instead of fear. Maybe you prayed for one area of healing without realizing that restoration often reaches places you never knew needed healing in the first place. Stop measuring your future by the limits of yesterday. There are gifts that cannot be counted before they arrive because they were never designed to fit inside human calculations. Sometimes the greatest blessing begins the moment you stop trying to reduce it into something your mind can fully explain. Think about Abraham standing beneath a sky filled with more stars than his eyes could count. God never invited him to calculate the promise. He invited him to trust the one who made it. Every star reminded him that some promises are too vast to be measured, and perhaps that was the lesson all along. The promise endured through years that made no sense because it was never sustained by Abraham's strength. It rested on the faithfulness of the one who had spoken it. Chosen one, your story rests on that same foundation. What has been spoken of your life does not rise or fall according to your perfect timing, your flawless faith, or your ability to understand every step ahead. So remember what has been unfolding throughout this message. The blessing ceiling was never built by God. It was slowly shaped by seasons that taught you to expect less than your heart was created to receive. The overflow you once feared was simply your soul learning how unfamiliar hope had become, and the invitation to sit was never about giving up. It was about finally choosing trust over constant striving. Now look at yourself through different eyes. You are not someone abandoned by the waiting. You are someone who has been quietly prepared through it. You are not standing in defeat. You are seated in expectation, chosen one, because there are blessings too large to be grasped by anxious hands, but perfectly received by an open heart. When your heart has lived beneath invisible limits for long enough, it slowly begins to mistake those limits for reality. Chosen one. There are seasons when you stop expecting goodness simply because disappointment has visited too many times. It is not that heaven has stopped reaching toward you. It is that your heart quietly learned to look lower than the place where hope has always been waiting. Maybe you have sensed that struggle inside yourself without knowing how to describe it. There were moments when something beautiful came close, and instead of peace you felt your chest tighten. You questioned the opportunity, doubted the relationship, or convinced yourself that it would disappear before you could fully receive it. Somewhere between faith and self-protection, your heart became so cautious that it forgot what open hands felt like. Then, little by little, something began to change. Not because your circumstances immediately became easier, but because you noticed yourself relaxing in places where you once braced for disappointment. You no longer reached for joy, expecting it to vanish. Instead, you allowed yourself to remain present long enough to discover that not every good thing was passing through your life on its way to somewhere else. Chosen one. That quiet shift matters more than you realize. Often the first miracle is not what changes around you. It is what changes within you. The moment your heart stops flinching, hope begins to feel familiar again, and what once seemed impossible suddenly has room to enter. Sometimes we spend years waiting for a blessing, only to discover that the blessing has been gently knocking while we were still standing behind doors built by old fears. There are seasons when the greatest transformation is simply learning to recognize what has already been moving toward you. Your eyes become softer, your spirit becomes quieter. What once felt distant begins to feel close enough to touch. Everything we have explored together has been leading here. Information alone cannot change a life. Understanding becomes powerful only when it settles beneath your thoughts and begins to reshape the way you see yourself, the way you breathe, and the way you walk into an ordinary morning, believing that something inside you has truly shifted. So if you are able, close your eyes for a moment. There is no need to rush. Just let yourself become still and imagine your life 6 months from now with gentle clarity, as though you have quietly stepped into a future that has been waiting for you all along. You are sitting in a room you know well, yet everything feels different. Morning light slips through the window and settles softly across the floor, and there is a calm in the air that your younger self would hardly recognize. The heaviness that once followed you from room to room has lifted, and in its place is a quiet spaciousness, as though your soul has finally remembered how to breathe without carrying the weight of yesterday. You reach for your phone, but something has changed. There is no rush to check for bad news, no anxious need to prove yourself, no familiar knot in your stomach before the day begins. You move with a quiet confidence, not because every question has been answered, but because the fog that once covered your heart has begun to clear. Across from you sits someone who truly sees you. They are not looking at the version of you that struggled to survive or constantly questioned your worth. They are recognizing the person who was always there beneath the exhaustion, beneath the waiting, beneath every season that tried to convince you to become smaller than you were created to be. Lie with that picture for another moment. Let yourself notice how your shoulders feel lighter, how your breathing has slowed, and how your hands no longer feel the need to hold on so tightly. Chosen one, this is not about escaping your life. It is about becoming present enough to recognize the person you have quietly been growing into all along. Now let your hands rest wherever they naturally fall. There is nothing to force and nothing to perform. Simply remain here for a moment, allowing every word that has reached your heart to settle a little deeper until it becomes more than something you heard it, becomes something you begin to live. Now, if you are able, take one slow breath in through your nose. Hold it gently for a few seconds and then let it leave your body without rushing it. As your breath flows out, imagine that everything we have called the blessing ceiling is no longer just an idea, but something you can actually see resting above you, close enough that you almost forgot it was there. Notice its weight. Notice how long you have lived beneath it without questioning whether it truly belonged there. Then, as you exhale again, picture a single crack forming directly above you. Not around the edges, but right at the center. Slowly that crack widens, and light begins to pour through it. Not in a thin stream, but like the first sunrise after a very long night. Allow yourself to stay with that image for a moment. Before your mind tries to explain it, simply notice what your body is doing. Perhaps your shoulders feel a little lighter. Perhaps your jaw softens, your breathing deepens, or your chest opens in a way it has not for a long time. Chosen one, sometimes your heart recognizes freedom before your thoughts know how to describe it. Remember this truth as you sit here. The ceiling above your life was never placed there by God. It was slowly built from disappointment, unanswered questions, and the quiet promises you made to yourself after being hurt one too many times. What you are feeling now is not something being added to you. It is something heavy finally beginning to leave. Now place your hand over your heart and simply listen for a moment. Feel the steady rhythm that has carried you through every difficult season, every lonely night, every silent prayer that no one else knew. You whispered. Your heart never stopped believing completely. Even when your hope grew quiet, it kept beating toward the future God had already seen. And now, chosen one, we arrive at the place where this message becomes more than words. It becomes something you carry with you after the screen goes dark. So hear these words slowly, as though they have been waiting for you long before today. My child, I have heard every prayer you prayed when you believed no one else was listening. I was present in the quiet rooms where tears fell without witnesses, and I held every dream that others dismissed before you ever considered letting it go. Nothing entrusted to me was ever forgotten, and nothing born from my heart for your life has been lost. The walls you built to protect yourself were understandable, but they were never powerful enough to stop what I had already prepared. They only delayed your ability to see what had been moving toward you all along. Chosen one, what has been waiting has never stopped coming, and this season is inviting you to receive instead of retreat. So breathe again, not because breathing itself changes everything, but because trust often begins with one quiet moment of surrender. Let every inhale become a gentle yes to what God is doing, and let every exhale become a peaceful release of everything that has kept your heart closed. Sometimes healing begins with nothing more dramatic than finally believing you no longer have to carry yesterday into tomorrow. Before anything else, I want you to know something. I am grateful for you. Not because you found this message, but because after everything life placed in front of you, your spirit is still here. You are still searching. You are still hoping. Somewhere deep inside you, a small light kept burning, even when everything around you felt dark. Now release what no longer belongs with you. Release the belief that blessing has limits. Release the habit of expecting loss before joy has the chance to arrive. Release the endless striving that convinced you Everything depended on your own strength, and let go of every timeline that left you believing you had somehow fallen behind. Release the voice that called fear wisdom. Release the thought that what God prepared for someone else could never belong to you. Release the exhaustion of trying to earn what has always been offered as a gift. Chosen one, whatever still stands between your heart and the freedom to receive, place it into God's hands and allow yourself to leave it there. Now speak these words with quiet conviction, not because repeating them creates truth, but because they remind your heart of what it has been slowly remembering all along. I am the chosen one. I am not defined by every season that tried to break me. I carry the evidence that I have been sustained through every fire. I was never meant to face alone. I am the one who remained when giving up would have been easier. I am the one who learned that surrender can carry more strength than endless striving. I am seated, my hands are open, my heart is willing, and I am ready to receive what fear once convinced me I could never hold. I am not behind. I have been growing in ways I could not always see. The places that once felt broken have become the very places where light now enters. And chosen one is no longer simply a title. I hear it as an identity I am learning to live with. Quiet confidence. If these words have settled deeply in your spirit, type "I am the chosen one" in the comments. Let it be your declaration of faith, your reminder that you are choosing to release old limits and receive what God has been preparing throughout every hidden season. Write it with honesty, write it with hope, and let those words mark this moment in your own heart. May this truth remain with you long after today. The one who began his work in your life has never stepped away from it, and he remains faithful through every season still unfolding. Amen. Before you leave, I want to ask you to do a few simple things. Not for me, but for someone who may be carrying the same invisible weight you once carried. If this message reached your heart, gently press the like button so it has a greater chance of reaching another chosen one who has been waiting for these words without even knowing it. Then think of one person who has been trying to carry life alone. Someone who has been standing through every storm when their heart has quietly longed to rest. Send them this message without explaining why. Sometimes the right words arrive at exactly the moment another soul is ready to hear them. And if you would like to continue walking through messages like this together, press subscribe and become part of this growing community of chosen ones. Until we meet again, remember this: what has begun inside you today does not end when this message ends. It continues quietly, gently reshaping your heart from the inside out. Trust the place where you chose to become still. Trust the one who invited you to sit before asking you to receive. Chosen one, the blessing prepared for your life has no ceiling. And the hope growing within you was never meant to have one either.